If I hear one more word about my money, there won't be any polite conversation left. I didn't yell, I just locked eyes with my father while Diane froze mid-bite, expecting a laugh that never came. This wasn't ordinary family tension, it was precision. A soldier's calm warning cutting through entitlement and assumption. The air was thick with fear, with realization. Before I dive into what happened next, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I want to see how far this story reaches. 3 days later, I was back on base, enveloped by the familiar hum of fluorescent lights and the sterile scent of the barracks. Everything about military life moved with precision, and I moved with it. I sat on the edge of my bunk, laptop open, not scrolling social media like everyone else, but running my weekly audit. Checking credit reports had become a ritual, a habit honed from years of knowing that privacy was fragile and vigilance was survival. As I scrolled, everything seemed normal until a single line made my stomach tighten. A hard moneylender, the kind that charges sky-high interest and asks no questions, had run a credit check on me just 48 hours ago. I didn't shout. I didn't panic. Instead, I felt the familiar click of analysis kicking in cold and methodical. I called my father, cutting straight to the point, but his voice betrayed him, riddled with excuses that fell flat against my trained instincts. Diane wasn't fumbling with computers. She was calculating. I remembered sitting 16, watching her tap numbers on a calculator, coldly tallying the cost of my existence. Electricity, water, groceries, all reduced to numbers on a page, every dollar I spent, framed as debt I owed. That ledger, long forgotten in memory, now cast a sharp light on the present. This inquiry wasn't just about money. It was about reclamation, about her measuring what she believed was owed. I closed the laptop, letting the initial anger settle into something sharper, a focus that had nothing to do with emotion and everything to do with strategy. The survival instincts that kept me alive on the battlefield now trace the digital footprints of betrayal. Every click, every scroll, every keystroke brought me closer to understanding her motive. The more I connected the past to the present, the tighter the tension coiled in my chest. I wasn't just investigating a financial intrusion, I was unraveling a lifetime of entitlement, tracing a thread that led from my childhood straight to this calculated act. And as I sat there surrounded by the controlled chaos of military life, I realized that patience, precision, and discipline would be my weapons in this fight, just as they had always been. The memory hit me like a cold draft through an open door. I was 16 again, perched at the kitchen island, trying to focus on homework, while Diane sat across from me, calm, clinical, tapping numbers into a calculator. She wasn't shouting or complaining. She was methodical. "Electricity is up," she said, not looking at me. "Water is up. Food costs are through the roof." Her eyes swept over me like I was a meter reading or a machine consuming resources. Every meal, every school trip fee, every pair of shoes my father bought had been meticulously logged, a running tally that framed my existence as a debt to be collected. I had seen that ledger once, a literal notebook of my life reduced to numbers, and even then, the chill it left in my chest was unforgettable. Diane didn't see herself as stealing. She saw herself as reclaiming what she believed was owed. And now, decades later, the credit inquiry stared back at me on the laptop screen, that same old ledger mentality made digital. 48 hours prior, a high-risk lender had accessed my credit and the pieces clicked into place. This wasn't a random act or a clumsy mistake. It was a continuation of the mindset I had observed in childhood, a belief that my life and resources were available for collection. The realization was sharp, but strangely calm. Anger flickered, but I didn't let it consume me. Instead, it hardened into a cold, strategic focus. I wasn't a teenager staring at a ledger anymore. I was a trained medic, a soldier, a tactician. Every lesson from the battlefield, every calculated decision, every pause before action informed how I processed this. I traced motives, connected the dots between past and present, and understood her pattern. Diane's entitlement, her entitlement that had once made my daily existence feel like a transaction, was now an actionable strategy. I could anticipate her moves because I had lived in the pattern of her thinking. The emotional sting of betrayal had long burned away, leaving only the measured precision of response. Childhood observations became the blueprint for understanding her current machinations. I wasn't reacting, I was preparing. And in that preparation, the anger that might have blinded a lesser person was transmuted into a sharp, clear tool ready to expose the depth of her calculation and to meet it with calculated counteraction. I didn't waste time calling the lender or getting stuck on hold listening to the hollow hum of elevator music while explanations rattled off into the void. I went straight to their web portal, sleek and aggressive, designed to ensnare anyone in 3 clicks or less. My email address was the key. Typing it in the system immediately recognized me, prompting for a password I had never set. Diane's arrogance had been thorough, but predictable. She had assumed I wouldn't check or that I could be intercepted before noticing. But she had made one critical mistake. The recovery method still relied on my phone. I clicked "Forgot password," watched the verification code arrive in seconds, entered it, and in that instant, the digital doors swung wide open. I was inside. The dashboard was horrifyingly simple, an unambiguous testament to her greed, a pending loan of $50,000 approved and poised for disbursement. The numbers alone would have made most people's stomachs drop, but I wasn't most people. I ignored the interest rate. It was criminally high, I already knew. But what I needed was something deeper, something that would never lie or falter. Metadata, the ghost in the machine. Every click, every signature, every interaction had left a trail. Opening the certificate of completion, I scanned with precision, moving down to the signature line. The name Bhatia glared back at me in digital script, but next to it the timestamp and the IP address were unmistakable. My father's static IP, the one I had configured 3 years ago for the smart home devices, proved that this signature was forged while I was 5,000 miles away, patching shrapnel wounds in a field hospital. Diane hadn't just lied, she had left her fingerprint embedded in the system. I downloaded PDFs, screenshots, exported logs, and meticulously filed everything into a new folder labeled simply Evidence. The click of the mouse echoed like a weapon being cocked in the quiet of the barracks. For the first time, anger faded, entirely replaced by a cold, precise satisfaction. Every element, her arrogance, the overlooked security feature, the assumption that I wouldn't investigate, had been accounted for and used against her. She believed herself untouchable, confident that her digital forgery would remain unseen. Instead, I had turned her confidence into vulnerability. Each document collected, each IP verified, each screenshot stored, solidified a power dynamic. I had only begun to appreciate I wasn't just the betrayed stepdaughter or the enraged victim. I was the strategist, the hunter, the one holding the map of the battlefield. And in that quiet room, surrounded by the order of military routine and the sterile hum of the bass, I understood the full scope of what I had uncovered. Diane's greed, her meticulous calculation, her sense of entitlement, all of it now lay exposed, orderly and undeniable. I had transformed rage into leverage, emotion into action, and chaos into preparation. The confrontation wasn't imminent yet, but the scales were tipping. The tools were in place, the evidence irrefutable, and the next move would not be mine. It would be dictated by the trap I had painstakingly set. Satisfaction settled in my chest, not as triumph, but as a readiness. I was ready for what came next. 2 days later, my phone lit up with Diane's name. I let it ring once, twice, enough to center myself before answering. Her voice was saccharine, dripping with a sweetness designed to disarm. "But Tia, honey, I'm so glad I caught you." She began launching into a rapid-fire pitch about a lake house she and my father had found. The words tumbled out urgent and rehearsed. The deal was too good to pass, but there was just one hiccup, a secondary signature needed to clear the bank's records, something about an old student loan and a release form. It was clumsy, almost insulting in its predictability. I let her talk, nodding internally to the cadence of her lies. This was bait, the very credit inquiry she had orchestrated, now dangling as the lure. I didn't interrupt. I didn't warn my father, though I could hear his silence humming through the call, a quiet complicity that was both frustrating and illuminating. He wasn't challenging her. He was letting her steer the conversation because it was easier than conflict. I had to resist the instinct to intervene. If I had stopped her now, it would have been a domestic argument, a messy tangle of family drama with nothing concrete to show. Instead, I let her narrative unfold fully. Each detail, each insistence, each assumption she made was recorded in my mind. I calculated every pause, every false urgency, every angle of persuasion. By allowing her to commit, by letting her lay the path before me, I was turning a personal dispute into a federal opportunity. Every step she took, every word she spoke, solidified the case I had already prepared. I wasn't reacting emotionally. I was waiting for her to expose the entirety of her plan to make the lie official and undeniable. The suspense built like a low drumbeat in the background, each second bringing the closing date closer, each word confirming my understanding of her recklessness. Thursday at 2, she said, at the downtown title company. She believed she was orchestrating the final act of her scheme, but in truth, she was walking directly into the trap I had set. Patience, foresight, and discipline weren't just military traits. They were now tools of justice. And as I hung up, I felt the quiet thrill of anticipation. The meeting wasn't just a confrontation. It was the culmination of observation strategy and calculated restraint. Diane was about to cross the line and I would be ready. The title company conference room smelled faintly of stale coffee and lemon polish, the kind of sterile aroma meant to lend gravity to financial transactions. Glass walls enclosed the space, transforming it into a fishbowl where every action felt amplified, every gesture scrutinized. Diane sat at the table, radiating triumph. Her cream blazer was pristine, chosen for this occasion, and she leaned forward, speaking animatedly to the lone officer, Mr. Henderson, as if victory were already in her grasp. My father Gary sat beside her, gray and sweating through his dress shirt, eyes fixed on a potted fern in the corner as though it held the secrets of the universe. His silence spoke volumes, a tacit acknowledgement of the wrong unfolding, but his fear kept him frozen, unable to intervene. I took my place across the table, uniform, crisp posture, controlled hands, folded. The presence alone seemed to make Diane uneasy, her smile tightening imperceptibly, while Mr. Henderson straightened, attentive now to the formality of the proceedings. As the officer slid the first stack of documents toward Diane, outlining the standard closing procedure, my attention sharpened. This was the kill zone, the moment where precision mattered more than reaction. Diane picked up the pen, unwavering, convinced of her invincibility. Section M was read aloud, down payment certification, confirming that the $50,000 in escrow was from her personal funds and not borrowed. Time seemed to stretch the pen, hovering in a moment that felt both infinite and fragile. Every instinct screamed to stop her, to prevent the disaster for my father, but I held back. Intervening now would reduce the scenario to a family spat-a-petty argument. Instead, I let her cross the line, ensuring the falsehood would be codified, notarized, and filed. She checked the box, signed her name, and the scratch of the pen sounded like a lock clicking shut. The document moved to my father. A subtle nudge under the table from Diane guided him, and he signed, a tremor in his hand, betraying his awareness of the deceit. The procedural dance continued until it was my turn. I reached into my bag, placing a heavy file on the table. The dull thud echoed, amplified in the tense quiet. I didn't glance at Diane. My eyes locked on Mr. Henderson. I stated clearly, ensuring the security camera recorded every word, that I could not sign the quitclaim deed or gift letter. Beneath the file lay the notarized affidavit of identity theft, federal documentation, and the lender's forensic audit trail. Henderson's smile vanished as he reviewed the evidence, IP logs, affidavit, deployment orders, all irrefutable. Diane exploded, accusations spilling forth, but Henderson's professionalism imposed order. The transaction froze, the closing terminated. Every move, every signature, every piece of paper now exposed her as a federal offender. Diane's confidence crumbled. My father slumped, complicit yet powerless. The room held the weight of calculated justice, the tension of discipline over chaos, as I had allowed the trap to unfold fully, and it had. The aftermath unfolded with swift precision. Security moved in immediately as Diane, desperate and enraged, lunged toward me, clawing for the file she believed held her victory. I restrained her, using a non-lethal hold, positioned directly under the watchful eyes of the security cameras, my actions measured, to protect myself without giving her leverage. She screamed and struggled, but control was no longer about anger. It was about discipline and safety. Outside the building, authorities took over, and weeks later, Diane faced indictment for wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, attempted bank fraud, and assault. The lake house deal collapsed, her plans obliterated, and my father left. Exposed by his complicity, saw his retirement liquidated to cover the debts she incurred. Gary lost everything, a stark consequence of enabling someone he should have restrained. I, meanwhile, enforced boundaries, blocking every line of contact, not out of spite, but as a measure of self-preservation. My life, my finances, my peace were no longer subject to manipulation or entitlement. Sitting now in my modest apartment, I reflect on what closure means. It isn't a feeling of triumph or vindication. It's the quiet hum of a locked door, the calm certainty of a phone that rings without fear, and a bank balance that is undeniably mine. I paid for that silence with vigilance, strategy, and patience, and in doing so, reclaimed control. To anyone watching who has had to protect themselves from those who should have protected them, you understand the weight of boundaries and the clarity that comes from enforcing them. If you've ever faced a situation where self-preservation was paramount, leave a heart and know you're not alone. There's more to come, more chapters in the court proceedings, more steps in the aftermath, and the resolution is still unfolding. But for now, in this moment, there is safety, there is certainty, and there is the unshakable knowledge that what is mine remains mine. Now, sitting quietly in my own space, I feel the calm that comes with true control. The chaos, the betrayal, the threats, they're all behind me. What remains is the quiet certainty of boundaries and force of a life safeguarded and possessions undeniably mine. If this story resonates, leave a heart to mark the moment and stay tuned for the next chapter as the court case continues to unfold. For now, there's only the peace of knowing that what's yours cannot be taken without consequence.